Welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are going over the results of my themed Letterboxd 4 series for the month of March, which was Women's History Month. Now if you're new to this series, this video is going to be in a playlist with all of the other episodes so far in this series, but basically the quick rundown is there's the first video that's typically kind of toward the beginning of each month where we talk about what the category is, we introduce what my current Letterboxd 4 is, and I talk about some films that I'm going to watch in that category. So, I mean, just examples of some categories. This is obviously Women's History Month. We've done Black History Month. We've done Best Picture winners. We've done horror. We've done comedy, animation. Like, we've done so many different categories and genres. And so we introduced 10 films that I'm going to watch in that video. Then this video is the results video that usually comes out toward the beginning of the next month, where I just go over every single thing that I watched over that month, and sometimes, like the previous month, sometimes I extend it a little bit an extra month. But I just talk about all of the films I've seen that fit in that category within the last little bit, and then we discuss what is entered, if anything, has entered into that Letterboxd 4. Now, just as a reminder, there are some films that are ineligible because they've already been picked in a previous Letterboxd 4, so I would recommend watching the setup video, the preview video for the Women's History Month. If you are curious about what films didn't make the cut, there was a lot that didn't make the cut here. And as far as just kind of the rules for what was eligible, the film had to be directed by a female and have a lead female performance. It didn't necessarily have to be like the lead, the absolute main character, but it just, it had to be one of the two. And if it was a romance film, one of the two leads had to be a woman, and that was kind of all of the qualifications really for what was eligible. Any genre, anything else, all fits as long as it had a women director and a woman lead. And without further ado, let's take a look at the films that just missed the cut. The Testament of Anne Lee. I didn't know much about this film going into it, other than Mona Fastvold in the director's chair, and Amanda Seyfried as the titular role. I was impressed by how much I was moved emotionally from the songs/prayers and the script overall. Oh hi. I knew nothing about this besides Molly Gordon and Logan Lerman as the leads, so I had a blast with the absurd premise. As the film mainly centered in one room, it could have gone sideways quick, but all the performances were top-notch and kept the film riveting. Die, my love. The only thing I knew about this film is that Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson give great performances, so I was definitely caught off guard by the style of the storytelling. I have heard great things about a few of Lynn Ramsay's other films, so I made sure to seek out another one this month. Wuthering Heights. I admittedly know nothing about the Emily Bronte novel, so I don't know what all is changed in this film, but I can't imagine this was an accurate adaptation. There are some moments that did work for me, but at the end of the day, it didn't win me over. If I had legs, I'd kick you. Rose Byrne is incredible here. It's not easy carrying a film where you're the only one on screen for the majority of the screen time, but her powerhouse performance made it seem effortless. The Ugly Stepsister. Probably the darkest story I watched for this category, the film really commits to its grim style. I don't get queasy often, but there is a scene in this that made me have to look away in fear of what would happen if I didn't. Little Amelie, or The Character of Rain. This is a film that caught me so off guard, and is one of my top 10 favorite films of last year. The animation is beautiful, and there was so much care put into the characters and their story. Barbie. While it's certainly my lowest ranked of Greta Gerwig's filmography, I still have a lot of fun with each time I watch this. The cast is stacked with excellent comedic performances, but it's the emotion from Margot Robbie and America Ferrera that bring the film home. The Bride. This was one of my more anticipated films of the early part of the year, but unfortunately I left pretty disappointed. I've seen a lot of criticism of Jessie Buckley's performance, and while it's no Hamnet, I do think she does a good job at giving the performance that was asked of her. My Old Ass. I remember being skeptical going into this a few years ago, but I left the theater a wreck. A couple years later, and the rewatch had me crying just as hard. Shiva Baby. This was my introduction to Rachel Sennett, and it remains my favorite performance of hers. She has great chemistry with Molly Gordon, and I hope she continues to make films with Emma Seligman. Sleepless in Seattle. It's surprising to me how well this worked for me, when there is a character whose entire plotline bugged me. There's so many great options, so it's impossible to rank, but this may be up there as one of my favorite Tom Hanks performances. Rye Lane. This was my introduction to David Johnson, and I have been a massive fan of his career ever since. His chemistry with Vivian Oparah and the Before Trilogy-style script work incredibly well and won me over. You've Got Mail. Hard to say whether I like this more or less than Sleepless in Seattle, but I will say I like how there are more scenes with both Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks together, so we can see their chemistry. The film is a charming time capsule of a period right before my time. Women Talking. This was one of my favorite films of 2022, and I was still as emotional watching it all these years later. The film is very dialogue heavy, but the screenplay does a phenomenal job at getting you to understand everyone's viewpoints, and that makes for a very compelling film. Mamma Mia. I think this is a film I'll have to watch several more times before I find the love for it that so many others have. I did have a great time singing along to ABBA, but the story didn't completely win me over. Twilight. This was my first time ever watching this, and I can understand both how someone may hate this and someone else would consider it a cult classic. I'm sure I'll finish the series at some point, but the first film didn't exactly hook me into finishing them. Debs. I knew next to nothing about this film going in, so I was shocked to see it had a 3.7 on Letterboxd. While I don't think it's that good, I can see why so many are passionate about it to drive the rating up. The Virgin Suicides. I mean, I probably should have expected it from the title, but there were a few moments in the film that caught me off guard. Kirsten Dunst is great as always, and the style makes me want to continue further into Sofia Coppola's filmography. Clueless. I liked the film, but this is one I was hopeful I'd love based on everyone else's opinion of it. There are several lines of dialogue that had me laughing, so hopefully on additional rewatches, the film will feel more iconic to me. Nomadland. This film is the definition of a film that you can appreciate for how impeccable the filmmaking is, while not exactly loving the film overall. It is very intimate, and Bob's monologue at the end of the film gets me every time. We need to talk about Kevin. Tilda Swinton, John C. Reilly, and Ezra Miller all give phenomenal performances, and the feeling of a lack of chemistry amongst them worked very well. Not saying it needed to be more disturbing, but I was expecting the film to go even deeper than it did. Happening. The film covers a topic that has been tackled several times in cinema, but this film is so intimate and bold in its storytelling that it stands out from the others. It didn't come together all the way for me, but I respect the vision and the courage to tell the story. Little Women. As a massive fan of Greta Gerwig's version, I was excited to finally check out the older versions of this film. While I still like the story, the film doesn't quite have the same heart and charm of the 2019 film. Now, since the setup video where I established my current Letterboxd 4, this month there was one new entry into that Letterboxd 4, so let's talk about the film that had to leave. The Edge of 17. Between this and Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, Kelly Fremon Craig is one of my favorite upcoming filmmakers. Haley Steinfeld captures the world-is-ending teenager angst beautifully, and Woody Harrelson is prickly and charming at the same time. This was super close to making the final Letterboxd 4, but ultimately had to make way for another film. Without further ado, let's take a look at that final Letterboxd 4. After Sun. Sophie reflects on the shared joy and private melancholy of a holiday she took with her father 20 years earlier. Memories fill the gaps between camcorder footages as she tries to reconcile the father she knew with the troubled man she didn't. The film was nominated for Best Actor for Paul Mescal at the 2023 Academy Awards. After Sun was released in 2022 and was directed by Charlotte Wells. The film stars Frankie Corio, Paul Mescal, and Brooklyn Tulson. Now, After Sun is just an absolute kind of gut punch of a film, and it's a film that there's a lot of films where, maybe kind of the reveal at the end, or kind of, what ends up happening to characters, like maybe, that is a spoiler or something that you maybe don't want to know as you're watching the film. You want it to kind of be this organic thing. There's something about After Sun that drops a whole lot of hints along the way of what's going to happen to a character, but it's also very... I remember when it came out, it wasn't open in its marketing of the film as much as it was just the discussion of the film. Everyone kind of already knew what the story was about, and the description, the summary of the film, it kind of hints at it a little bit as well. But this, I'm trying to say, that film is one where I think that knowing the fate of a character makes it even sadder and more beautiful, and it creates this very interesting experience, and this way of viewing this. This feels very similar in a sense to me to the Florida Project, where not just because they're both taking place in hotels, but because it's a daughter and their parent. And it's this film about where there is very serious issues going on with the parent. There's very, in this film, it's, depression. In the Florida Project, it's more so money issues, but there is like a very serious issues going on with the parents in these films, but it's told through the child's perspective, and it's told through kind of this, in the Florida Project, kind of this childlike wonder in a sense. In here, it's not as much as like a fairy tale, as the Florida Project comes off as, but here it's more so kind of the reality of just a kid, with her camcorder, recording things, recording this family vacation, and the idea of that she's just kind of recording her father, recording these moments, recording intimate, just beautiful things without fully understanding what's going on with her father, with Paul Mescal's character, not understanding the depth of what he's struggling with, what is affecting him. Like, to her, it's just a vacation with her dad, and there's definitely moments where I think you can kind of see as a kid she is kind of getting the sense of it, and she maybe is picking up on some things of like she understands the headspace he's in, but it still is. It's a child. Like it's still kind of this childlike view of it all, which I think is just creates a very interesting dynamic of the film. The thing with After Sun that you hear a lot of people talk about, and what I'm going to talk about, is just the kind of crushing nature of like the final moments, especially in the film. The under pressure like dance sequence going into the is it like an airport, like the airport hallway that Paul Mescal's walking down, like just the way that's shot, the way that final scene is edited too, the way like the camera turning and flashing into like present day Sophie, I think is just was a nice touch. There's just so many things about the filmmaking, the characters, the acting, like everything about this film is top notch, and it's a big thing for me always, that I love the most in a lot of films is if it is the same writer and director, like if that pairing is there, I almost feel like you always, I guess not always, but oftentimes you get the exact story that this filmmaker is trying to tell. You don't lose out on certain scenes or certain moments where if a writer is writing this and it's like, okay, this is key, this is pivotal, and then the director just doesn't understand it and maybe they don't include that scene or whatever, I think you sometimes lose out on those moments where there is not the same person that's writing and directing. When you get the same person writing and directing, like you do here with Charlotte Wells, you get this intimate story about her life. It's very personal, it's very intimate, and then she gets to keep in the details that were important to her. And as you're watching, you definitely pick up on a couple of these moments. You pick up on a couple of these just details that pop up in the film, and I just think it makes for a very beautiful and sad and emotional viewing experience. Anatomy of a Fall. A woman is suspected of her husband's murder, and their blind son faces a moral dilemma as the sole witness. The film won for Best Original Screenplay at the 2024 Academy Awards. The film was also nominated for Best Picture, Best Director for Justine Triet, Best Actress for Sandra Hüller, and Best Film Editing. Anatomy of a Fall was released in 2023 and was directed by Justine Triet. The film stars Sandra Hüller, Swan Arlaud, and Milo Machado Grainer. Now, Anatomy of a Fall was kind of interesting inclusion here because it was like the most, once I was kind of doing the research again, because there were so many, I think there was like 10 plus films that were ineligible between, Little Women and Portrait of a Lady on Fire and Love and Basketball, and I can't think of everything off the top of my head that Desert Hearts would have been in there. Like there were so many different films that just kind of weren't included because they were already been picked in previous Letterboxd 4s. So once I kind of moved through a lot of those, took a lot of those films out, and I see Anatomy of a Fall sitting there, it felt like pretty obvious that it was going to be one of the final Letterboxd 4 because I did really like it. I watched it a couple times that year that it came out before the Oscars, and I haven't watched it since. So this would have been the 2024, so in the last 2 years I haven't watched the film. And I remember really liking it back then, and so I was excited for a rewatch. I rewatched it, and turns out I love this film a lot more than I remember liking it back then. It instantly bumped up to a 5-star film for me. It is a very fascinating story, the way that it's told. And I think it also does a thing that is very interesting in its the way that the story's told. Is it's a courtroom drama, but it's a courtroom drama that isn't clear cut, and it's not like a thing of where we're following the main character. I'm trying to think of like other examples, but like there's some other courtroom dramas where you'll watch the film and you're following the main character who's on trial, and so you're very well aware that they didn't commit the crime. They didn't do, like a Shawshank Redemption or something. Like they didn't commit whatever they are in prison or just on trial for. They didn't do it. And so it becomes this film kind of more so about justice and more so about, trying to win the case to get them off the hook or get them, the justice that they deserve. This film is more so told from the perspective of, because there's an incident that happens at the beginning of the film. We don't get to see it. We get to see bits leading up to it. We get to see, kind of the key things that will come up in the trial. And then we don't see the moment. We see how a couple characters react, and then we then, kind of move forward in the story, and then all of a sudden we're like, okay, well now this is going to trial because of the optics of it, like the look of it. Like, obviously you're going to be on trial here, and you're going to have to, prove your innocence. And then all of a sudden we're now getting this story from the bits that we saw, and then we're hearing character, not Justine Triet, Sandra Hüller's character. She's Sandra is her character's name in the film. She is having to fill in what we didn't see and fill in with what led up to this moment, what previous history with her husband, all of these different things that are all coming into play, that then we as the audience are essentially kind of getting fed both sides of this from the defense and from the prosecution, and it's almost like you find yourself becoming like a jury member in this case. And so I think it's just very fascinating the way that it's told. And then even, without spoiling the end, once you get to the end, I still don't even know if it's necessarily a definitive we know what happened or what didn't happen, as much as you kind of got the story, and you as the audience member were put in. You got to experience this thing, you got to see both sides, you got to learn all the facts and the arguments of this case, and then really it's kind of up to you to make the decision. There is ultimately a decision that's reached based off of another character that gives kind of a statement and states their case for what they believe happened or what they believe previously happened, and kind of as a character statement for someone. And that ultimately kind of results in maybe how the case wraps up, but it's still not like a definitive, we didn't get this answer at the end of the film that was like, and here's the happy ending where everything is perfect. Also, you get this ending of like, here's the results of the case. It's still kind of up to you as the audience member as you're watching this film. And so this was a film for me that just, on each watch, I think I learned to appreciate that more and more, of a film that isn't just completely holding your hand and telling you what did or what didn't happen, or showing you the things, or like showing you the things before this ever goes to trial, and then you're watching it being like, oh, that it's bad faith arguing, or that it's whatever coming from the prosecution side. Instead, you're learning what the prosecution's putting out there, and you're thinking, okay, I see what you're getting at, I understand how that could be a thing. And so there's just a whole lot with this screenplay specifically. That's the best part of the film. The second best part of the film, obviously, Sandra Hüller. The argument scene with her husband, the flashback. What is her line? You're something. It conceals something dirtier and meaner. Like, the way that she delivers that line is just so like cutting. Like, it's an excellent performance from her. Milo Machado Grainer as well. He does an excellent job as her son in the film. There's just so much. I mean, the screenplay up and away is my favorite part, but all of the acting led by Sandra Hüller just really makes for a very compelling and investing viewing experience. Coda. As a coda, child of deaf adults, Ruby is the only hearing person in her deaf family. When the family's fishing business is threatened, Ruby finds herself torn between pursuing her love for music and her fear of abandoning her parents. The film won 3 Oscars at the 2022 Academy Awards, winning for every category it was nominated for. Best Picture, Best Actor in a Supporting Role for Troy Kotsur, and Best Adapted Screenplay. Coda was released in 2021 and was directed by Sean Heder. The film stars Amelia Jones, Marlee Matlin, and Troy Kotsur. Now, Coda was the new entry that just found its way into the Letterboxd 4, and ultimately, I think I had it out. I had it behind Edge of 17 at the beginning of the month, and I understand why I did that because it's one of those where it's just like I really love the Edge of 17, and I think I kind of wanted to like give that the recognition. But then it's just something about every time I watch Coda, like my heart is warmed. Like am in love with the film. I'm charmed with it. There's so much beauty. There's so much heart, and like there's so much about this film that just genuinely makes me happy. And Coda was one of those films that when it won Best Picture in 2022, it's what I was rooting for. It's what was it what I would have picked. I have to remember that. Off the top of my head, I can't remember what was Coda the same year. No, because that's the Nomadland year. Anyway, I think Coda might have been my favorite of that year, but I don't remember for sure off the top of my head. But it is what I was like rooting for because between that and The Power of the Dog, which is ultimately what the battle ended up being, I definitely preferred Coda over it. And it was one of those that I was rooting for it, and I was so happy with the film. And then it was immediately once it won, I feel like there was always some kind of haters and some people that didn't like the film, but it felt like that the second it won, people that were rooting for it turned on it immediately and were like, "Oh, worst Best Picture winner since Green Book," or "Worst Best Picture winner since whatever the bad 19 Tom Jones, is that the one I'm thinking of? Like, there's things back in the 30s that people really hate that won Best Picture, and like people immediately just turned on Coda so fast. And so Coda is one of those films, and that's ultimately why it made my Letterboxd 4 here, because it's one of those films I want to stand up for every time I get a chance because I love it so much. I think it is just a beautiful, it's not a perfect movie, but it is so beautiful and it's so charming and it gets its message across and really gets it there with the emotion. And so I love the film, and I want to be a defender for it every time that it gets the attacks that it gets, and talking about how it's one of the worst Best Picture winners and what have you. There's so much about this film that is great. I love the story, the decision, for Amelia Jones's character, Ruby, that she has this decision of like she has this kind of career path that she can take. She has the career path that I think she feels like she's stuck, like having to go to, and you understand the pros and cons of both, where it's like there's the one that almost feels like she has to go because she has to help her family, like she feels kind of trapped and feels like she can't really escape the fishing lifestyle, and if she leaves, what's going to happen to her family? Can her family support themselves without having a hearing person that's helping them out? And then there's the alternate way of her having this passion for singing that I think is ultimately undercut and like makes it even more tragic or sad in a way that is her passion due to the fact that her parents can't hear her. And so I think that creates two of my favorite scenes of the film. The one where she's singing at the school play, or not school play, like the school, is it a talent show? Or just choir performance, whatever it was, that she's singing, and everyone's singing, like clapping along, and then all of a sudden it cuts to her parents and her brother, her family's point of view, and the audio just cuts. Like, that's such a brilliant kind of cut of audio there, and then you watch the rest of that performance just in pure silence as her parents and Mark Durand, is that that's the actor's name? I can't think of what her brother's name is in the film, but as they watch on just in pure silence, I just think that was a great creative decision of illustrating this moment. And then that ultimately then leads to the next kind of really beautiful scene of when Ruby and her family, when they come home, and Troy Kotsur's character, her dad, stays outside with her on the truck and is like listening to her sing, and then putting his hands on her neck to like feel her voice, like as it's vibrating, like feel the vibrations as she's singing. Like, every time that scene happens, like I start crying. That scene is so emotional. The Both Sides Now, her rendition, her audition for, is it Berkeley? Is that where the school she's trying to get into? But as she's doing her audition there at the end, like that's an emotional scene. Like there's so much about this film that is just so beautiful and emotional. Those are the key words that I'm saying multiple times discussing this film, because those are like the important things to highlight for me and what makes this film so great. And it makes it a film that, again, despite everyone kind of turning on the film, or maybe they were always kind of negative toward the film, like I want to be a defender for this film just because of how much I loved it. The Substance. A fading celebrity decides to use a black market drug, a cell replicating substance that temporarily creates a younger, better version of herself. The film won for Best Makeup and Hairstyling at the 2025 Academy Awards. It was also nominated for Best Picture, Best Director for Coralie Farjat, Best Actress for Demi Moore, and Best Original Screenplay. The Substance was released in 2024 and was directed by Coralie Farjat. The film stars Demi Moore, Margaret Qualley, and Dennis Quaid. And I really kind of like how this Letterboxd 4 kind of turned out, because you get After Sun, like you get a family drama, you get Anatomy of a Fall, which is, I guess, kind of like a courtroom drama. You get Coda, which, I guess is another family comedy drama, kind of fits a couple different things. And then you get The Substance, which is just horror. Like, all of a sudden you get to the end and it's like, sure, maybe there's some drama, there's some comedy and like comedic moments in there, but like, it's horror. And so it was really cool to kind of get a horror film in the Women's History Month video. And this film is one where, for me, a benchmark of if a film is good is because I often go and I see a lot of films just kind of by myself. Just go to the cinema and go watch a film, and there's a lot of films I watch and I'm like, that's great, and maybe I don't think about it, or maybe I wait again till I can rent it, or it's streaming or something, I can watch it again later. But once I see it, I'm kind of like, that's great. A true benchmark for me is if I see a film by myself, and immediately as I'm leaving the theater, I'm texting one of my friends and that I go and see a ton of movies with. I'm texting him and just saying, like, clear your schedule, like, we're going to a movie tomorrow, like, you're coming with me, and and I could drag a friend to something blind. And just the experience of seeing this with my buddy in the theater was incredible, because he's not really like a big horror fan, and I think even more so than not really being a big horror fan, I don't know if he's really like a body horror. Like, I don't know if he's really watched anything body horror. And so seeing this with him, like, it feels like you're showing someone like this really messed up movie, and you're like, you gotta watch this, and seeing his reaction, and then seeing so many other reactions of people that were all discovering this film was just a whole lot of fun. Again, this is another film that, pretty much like everything here, maybe other than Anatomy of a Fall, that's pretty close to being a perfect movie. So is After Sun. So maybe it's just kind of like Coda. This and Coda, like, they're not perfect movies. They're not like these masterpieces that don't have a single flaw. There are flaws. There's things you can critique. There's things within the story, or plot holes, or things that you can kind of nitpick and stuff. But this is one of those films that very clearly and very early establishes itself as kind of this alternate reality, or not the real world. It's taking a lot of inspiration, or it's telling stories about our world, but like through kind of this like fantasy world. And so there's a lot of those issues for me that immediately I just kind of like don't care. I'm just like, cool, like things that aren't going to make sense, but it's like, doesn't really matter, because we've already kind of established that we're in this alternate reality, and we're in this different world. And so The Substance, I think, does a great job of kind of capturing this new version of Los Angeles, this new universe in a sense, and telling the story that like feels so close to being like a story of our world, but then being so far-fetched and so out there that it's just this very fun experience. And this is a film that it's just fun is the best way to describe it, because as the film is going and as it's progressing, you're kind of like, okay, it's building to something, and you can feel, I mean, obviously every film is, but like this film, it feels like it's building to a very important climax, and we're getting there, we're seeing the decisions, the choices that our characters are making, specifically Margaret Qualley's character, Sue. You see kind of the bad choices she's making, then you see Elizabeth Sparkle, Demi Moore's character, you see some of the decisions she makes, because then she kind of is making some bad decisions, but her bad decisions aren't necessarily affecting Margaret Qualley's character as much as her decisions really affect Demi Moore's character as the film goes on. And so it's just kind of this back and forth between these two characters, and it's really fun to have these two. Obviously Demi Moore is the lead and Margaret Qualley is a supporting performance, but like they feel almost co-leads at times. It's very interesting to have these two characters that are very clearly leading this film almost never have like any real interaction with each other just because of the nature of the story, how the story works. And so it's like it's just these two having their chemistry with everyone else besides working with each other, I think is really well done. And again, this film, it is just building to this climax. It reaches the climax and you watch it and you're like, wow, that was an incredible payoff. Time to turn off the movie, let's go home. And then there's 30 more minutes of just like more and more and more and more payoffs. And it's like, for me, the first time watching this film, because I kind of have a pretty good internal clock when I'm watching movies, regardless of it, even if I don't know how long the film is supposed to be, like, or how long the film actually is when I'm watching it. I have a pretty good internal clock where I can feel the beats and I can feel like, okay, here was this kind of moment in the film, then we just got to this moment, which means we probably kind of have one big final scene or we have one big conflict left to resolve, or we're getting to this point where I'm like, okay, we're reaching the resolution. This was a film that I was 1,000% positive we had reached the end of the film, and then it goes for another 30 minutes, and those 30 minutes take this film from something that is fun to batshit crazy, and anything that is in that realm almost always, I guess, I don't want to say definitively, there could be some exceptions to this, but anything that ever gets to that level of batshit crazy that is still fun, like, I am all for it, and it creates just like a super fun viewing experience for me, but then also a viewing experience where I have to bring as many friends and get as many other people to see the film as possible because of everything that's just into that moment. It is an absolute blast. I love the film. I know it is not a film that is for everyone, and especially in this list, like Coda, After Sun, Anatomy of a Fall, like, I'd recommend those to pretty much everyone. Maybe After Sun, there's a couple people, maybe I would. But for the most part, those three I would recommend to almost everyone because they're just great films. The Substance is a great film that I would not recommend to everyone because obviously you have to be willing to watch a body horror because it's maybe not the most gross body horror, but it definitely, like, it pushes it and it does some things and it makes some decisions with some characters and shows some things that are quite upsetting. And so it's like it's one of those films that your mileage may vary with it, but for me, I love The Substance. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know down below in the comments what you thought of these films, all the films I discussed. Let me know what your Letterboxd for would be in this specific category. Would love to see if there's kind of any films I missed, or if something like you suggest that would be in your Letterboxd for, maybe we'll see if it was kind of one of my excluded films. Because again, there was like 10 or 12 that are already been taken, so they weren't eligible here. So many, like Lady Bird was another one that I didn't talk about, is being excluded. There's so many exclusions that just didn't make it into this list. So let me know all of that down below. As for the next episode in this series, in a couple days I will upload the preview for April's month, now that we're essentially already done with the month. I swear I'm going to get caught back up on these, I promise. I've already been watching a lot of the April themed, or the films that fit the theme for April, so we'll just get that video uploaded in the next couple days of what the actual theme is, so you can kind of watch along if you would like with some of those films that fit in that category. But yeah, that is it for this video. So again, let me know down below in the comments what you thought of these films, and if you'd like to like this video and then subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future episodes in this series or any of the other series I have going on the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. Also, there is a link to my TikTok page in the description of this video. I have become a lot more active on TikTok in the last month or so I'd appreciate it if you drop me a follow over there as well. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.